We are recording and we are live. This is episode 4 of Start, Scale, Grow, a podcast for technology recruiting for businesses that are either starting, scaling, or growing. There's lots of podcasts out there for VC people and for founders looking for money and for advice on how to grow a business, but there's nothing really that focuses on the recruitment side of things, and this is what this podcast is all about. This is episode 4, and we're here today with Lauren from Kismet Healthcare. Lovely to see you. I say Kismet Healthcare. Not many people would have heard of Kismet yet. Big caveat yet. But a few people in SaaS world and in tech world, particularly Melbourne, would have heard of your prior business, Xplor. But Lauren, welcome. Thank you for being here. Did you want to take a minute or two just to talk about who you are, your background, what you do?
Yeah, awesome. So thank you for the intro. So my name's Lauren. Been pretty heavily involved in the tech scene in Melbourne over the last 10 or 15 years, predominantly as a software engineer. So more recently moving into leadership positions, and then at the end of the last year, I decided to make a bit of a change and start my own thing. So me and a few other friends co-founded a company, Kismet, and now on a bit of a different journey, looking at the experience and kind of encompassing customer experience, product experience, and employee experience into the one umbrella, seeing if we can make a change there. So yeah, a bit of a new journey for me, but predominantly background in tech for quite a while.
Nice, thank you. And tell me, how much more terrifying is it when it's your own money, not somebody else's?
Oh my gosh.
That you're playing with.
Everything is the cheapest now. You've got to cut the corners you can.
Yeah. Manage those costs, baby. Well, look, the reason I was really keen to have you come on board was because of your engineering background and your experience of growing teams. Our previous guests have all been on the recruitment side of things, so I thought just mixing it up and having someone who's more on the hiring manager side of things, someone who's grown teams in an early stage business, I thought that might just be an interesting perspective. Your team at Xplor, the engineering team that you sort of built there, initially was the mobile team to start with. Is that right?
Yeah. So I joined the team when there was, I think there was probably 3 of us. So very, very small. This was very early days Xplor. So the company wasn't big anyway. So yeah, joined very much a time where we were needing to expand very quickly. And then, sort of had to learn about the whole hiring process as I went along and made some mistakes, learned a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously had some really, really great successes with hiring some amazing people. But yeah, that was a big learning curve for me, is taking that role.
Nice. And had you done much hiring prior to that? Had you may have been involved in some interviews and some hiring process, but had you been like the decision maker, like the person who owns that headcount previously?
Not particularly. So the role I was at before, I was a people leader, but the hiring was sort of done a little bit above me, as we were still very small startup as well. So it was sort of, you hire who you can get. Xplor was probably the first place I actually had to get heavily involved with the hiring process and all the responsibility that comes along with that.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna have fun talking about that. There's a real difference in early stage hiring to established company hiring, where there's probably different time constraints. There's probably different resource constraints as well. Just not as many people involved in or available to be involved. Potentially very little brand awareness as well. When you're an established business and you've maybe got an established brand from an employer perspective, but potentially an established consumer brand as well that drives potential candidate traffic your way. Plus often established leaders within your business as well, who kind of act as their own attraction brand as well, if that makes sense. So definitely these different forces at play, and the way that hiring happens is different. But for you, when you're building this early stage team, you've got very little process around stuff, very little things documented. Outside of the technical skills, what sort of things were you looking for specifically from the people that you were hiring?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the biggest things that not just myself, but anyone else on the interviewing team would really look for is just that ability to kind of be able to go along on the journey with the company. So not coming in and saying, I have expectations of this particular role, this is what I do, and I'm never going to leave this sort of role.
Yeah.
Someone who is pretty hungry to learn more, to grow, got that common word, that growth mindset.
Yeah.
And not willing to sort of sit back and let things slide, where they know that, they can sort of jump in, take ownership, and really build things. So really looking for someone that's actually, I guess we'll talk about this later, but more so than anything, the actual person themselves, what they're like, and skills really come almost second or third to all of that. But just getting those right people on the team so that as that startup evolves and changes, they're going to be with you and actually help and support the change rather than working against it.
Yeah.
So looking for those personality traits of really, risk takers, but also people who think things through, people who are going to challenge your opinions as well, and people who are confident in themselves and their skills, but not necessarily, don't have the huge ego, which can also sometimes get into the way. But I think definitely personality and approach to how they learn, how they work, what they want as well is also really important.
Yeah. I think there's this thing as well, right, there where early stage businesses, there's so many unknowns. There's so many things we don't know yet. We've got assumptions about what a customer wants and what we're going to build for them. But life and business throws up things that you've never experienced before that no one accounted for. And I think this thing you described it, this growth mindset of being able to just look at any problem that comes your way and, hey, someone's got to fix this. If the team's busy, then it probably has to be me. So this flexibility and being able to look outside of stuff that, this is my PD, this is my job description, that's my responsibility, that's all I do.
Definitely.
Which in more established teams, you need that. Particularly in bigger teams, you need people probably staying a bit narrower because all these dependencies rely on each other to get things done. But when you don't have that scale and you don't know what you don't know yet, things come up, somebody's got to fix it. It might as well be me if everyone else is busy. I think that's the sort of core difference, right?
Exactly. And picking up that curiosity to sort of learn more and, realizing that they might look over and see someone else is struggling in a different area and go, I can help out there. Let me, jump on the phone and give the customer a call.
Yeah.
Not being confined to that predefined box.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you screen for that? How do you look for that? How do you probe around this?
Yeah, it's usually it's a lot of situational questions. Tell me about a time where, you didn't like an idea and you challenged a superior or something like that. Tell me about a time X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And sometimes as well, particularly asking certain questions in a way that will evoke a certain response, because there's not just screening for the really good things, but also screening for the character traits which are less desirable.
Yeah.
And obviously, being a woman in tech, it can be a different experience for some people being interviewed by a female.
Yeah.
So I like to make sure hiring team's pretty diverse, asking lots of different questions. And so, there's lots of different ways to ask it, but those situational sort of questions, as well as just general body language, the way they approach things.
Yeah.
But it definitely threw a bit of a spanner in the works with COVID.
Yeah.
A bit harder to read certain things. But that general appeal as a person as well as.
Yeah. And I must point out, we're recording this on International Women's Day. So congratulations to all of you women out there who are crushing it. And in tech, you mentioned in tech. So I think the numbers I saw the other day in a report, we're sort of about 23% of the tech industry being women. So we definitely need to get more women and we need to get more women either thinking of tech as a career transition. So got a whole bunch of skills, but you could move over into tech and do something, or getting them earlier and getting more STEM happening, more STEM involvement happening in schools. So no easy fixes for it, but it's just stuff.
Oh no, this is a whole other conversation. But no, it's definitely improved, which is good.
Going back to how you're qualifying and looking and probing for these traits, these qualities. I agree. I think these sort of interview questions are really handy. The things that I've always liked to get into those, the sort of questioning is just posing a situation to people as well. Hey, this year we're going to have to really focus on stability across the platform. The volume and velocities going through our APIs are going to really increase exponentially. How would you go about that? Like, where would you start? And just like giving some real world examples and questions to people and just understanding how they think through some of those things.
Yeah, that is incredibly important. Probably up until the last 4 or 5 years, like I've never really understood why I disliked standard technical interviews so much. It was, here's a coding challenge, write up this thing, or what's the best algorithm to do this?
Yeah.
When that application in real life in the job is so far removed from anything you'll be doing in the day-to-day that it makes it really difficult. And so, you're right, like asking those questions that are more like, hey, like we've got this particular problem right now, like how would you go about solving that? So it's those real world examples. They can get a gauge of actually what they'd be doing in the job.
Yeah.
And also helps them understand how you'd work as a team, like, how the different departments might interact as well. Yeah. And getting them more of a, obviously for you as well, like understanding how they think, how they work things through. But for them, there's also that benefit as well of understanding what they may be doing in the day-to-day as well.
Absolutely. And I think that clarity around, understanding how does this person articulate sometimes complex things? Just how do they have a conversation? How do they think through problems? How do they potentially communicate together? Again, I've got this real bee in my bonnet at the moment about interviews in general. I think anyone watching this would have seen all the content we've been doing recently around this. They're probably not hard to guess. But interviews are this sometimes really sort of unnatural situation of this sort of forced conversation about a subject that our preconceptions of interviews always being horrible are one thing. But this unnatural environment, and we're asking and expecting people to be really natural and be themselves, but in this sort of unnatural setting, they're weird things. But until someone comes up with something better, that's, I guess, the way we need to do it. But there's not really any other way to really sort of gather data and understand people for who they are and all that sort of thing. And then you add on the complexity that we had up until probably Christmas just gone, where there's so much competition and everyone wants to move quickly, and you're trying to make the best decision you can with the most limited amount of time with somebody, and make a decision, which was actually a very skillful segue for me into this next thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on was the impact of mishires. Small team, early stage business. You're trying to move quickly. The impact of mishires and the impact on your team and your ability to get things delivered. You lose a team member. You lose 25% of your team if you're a small team mid sprint, and everyone else has then got to pick up the slack. What's been your experience of that in the past?
Yeah, it's definitely something you think about a fair bit when you are hiring. When you get to that last stage, you're like, oh, is there anything that is going to impact not just them to do their work, but the way the team interacts with them, the work that the company needs to get done as well. So mishiring can be definitely something that comes to the front of your mind. But again, mishiring is a tricky one because it's not even necessarily like a bad reflection on, the person you hired. It might just be the environment, the work, the pace of things, the interactions with other team members. And so sometimes you just don't really know how someone's going to go in that particular role with that particular team until they get in there. And so I guess this is where it comes on to having, that really good onboarding experience and getting, having the whole team involved in the hiring process at the first stage so they can chat with them rather than just bringing in a stranger into their team and expecting magic to happen. Having someone come in and also, understand kind of what the day-to-day is going to be like, because you've already discussed in the interviews. You've had those situational questions where they get a bit of a gauge. But there's always things that you won't be able to figure out are going to happen. And it might be like they may be going through something in their personal life as well, which is impacting their work currently.
Yeah.
And so I don't think mishiring necessarily needs to be a bad thing, but it can cost a fair bit of time, money, and effort, all of that.
Yeah.
So you just got to weigh those things up as well when you do discard that. But I think there's, that probation period for a reason. And, if you do get to that stage where there's, 3 months in and someone's just not working out for a particular reason, like company might just not be, up what they were looking for, or, many other reasons, like you can part on good terms and say like, hey, maybe this isn't for you. Like, we can help you find somewhere else. We know this really good role that's open here, which would align better with, where you want to go in your direction too. So it's just making sure, like, as much as you can be, just being open and honest, and, not seeing, mishiring as a 100% negative thing, but just definitely being aware that if it does happen, there are going to be pretty big impacts.
Yeah. A couple of things there that you said that I wanted to just dig into a little bit. You mentioned having your team involved in hiring and involved in probably some of the decision making. How important is that, do you think?
Huge. Making, especially when you have particularly like quite a diverse team, making sure you've got representation that reflects your team. And your team's doing the day-to-day work more than you as the hiring manager, people manager. You don't know the challenges that they face every day, or what they're going through in that moment, or things they're really excited about to improve in the future. And so having your team interview this candidate separately with you not even there is incredibly necessary. It's also giving them a great experience, all of that, but having those diverse opinions and views and then coming together afterwards and just chatting through things. Someone might raise, I felt that they answered this particular question this way. And you go, I hadn't noticed that, but you're right.
So there's a chance to sort of come together and share collaborative sort of thoughts and collaborative process to your decision making. I think that's sort of quite empowering for teams. I think particularly at an early stage as well, giving teams some of the ownership of who you allow into this early stage business.
Totally, because they're like, your team is the one that builds that culture. They're how you dictate, like, what sort of appearance your team has to other teams in the company, to, generally anyone who comes in. And so it is important for them to decide, like, as well, and have that input and feel like they also have ownership in the decisions too, and not just someone else is telling them what to do.
And so do you get your teams involved at the early stage before you've even started interviewing around sort of defining, okay, this is the role we need, this is the type of skill set we need, this is the kind of person that we're looking for? Do you have them involved in that right at the beginning?
So typically we'll have a discussion around what particular skill sets we need. If they really need a hand with something that requires a little bit more experience, they're looking for someone a bit more on the senior side, or if they're looking for really someone to be able to mentor. So one of the things that's also pretty common in tech is they're wanting to hire, most experienced and, get those people who are wizards, as some would say, which is very annoying, and have those people can just really hit the ground running. But when you've got such an experienced team, there's not as much time or opportunity for them to be able to mentor and sort of really help build out someone that, might just be coming into the industry. So figuring out what they are also looking for in terms of that, what, if they're looking for someone that might be help a particular problem that they're seeing on the horizon, all of this sort of stuff, any experience that might be relevant with that, but getting them involved in that early stage. And then also, if you are at a company where we do like coding challenge as well, getting them to build out that and, figure out what they want to look for. Any of those, that sort of first funnel that comes in that end up doing the coding challenges, they would review them. So the team would review it amongst themselves, give all the comments and feedback. So even if they're not actually interviewing someone, they're involved at some stage of that process. So there's all those sort of things that go on behind the scenes, but the team's involved pretty much from start till end.
Yeah, and tell me, did you see? Oh, sort of. I know you were at Xplor for a couple of years. Did you see sort of, and I don't know if improvement, but did you see a change in the way that your teams approached hiring and interviewing and the decision making they were doing? The more and more they did, the more comfortable they got with it.
Definitely got a little bit more comfortable. The first few ones are nerve-wracking for anyone.
Yeah.
You've only had that experience of sitting on the other side, which can really help because you actually have that empathy of understanding, the nerves that get associated with things and am I going to answer this question right? So typically a lot of people, when they do have that first interview on the other side where they're now asking the questions, they actually go really well with putting the candidate at ease, taking that stress and anxiety out of the situation. And that kind of goes with them throughout the whole process. Sometimes it can be a bit stressful for you as the interviewer and the team as well when you've got like 4 back-to-back and trying to ask the same questions and assess everyone on a similar scale. But the more you do, obviously, with anything, the better you get, the more comfortable you get with it. So it's definitely helps.
Nice. And I know, early stage when you're making your first few hires as a first time hiring manager, the bit of self doubt that you have in the ringing in the ears, like I'm always questioning the decisions you're making. We experience it here, and I'm sure you would have as well. Does that ease over time?
Yeah, in a weird sort of way. The biggest thing I always question myself is, do I like this candidate as a person? And that's what my gut's telling me? Or are they actually going to be good in this particular role with the team? So it's a bit tricky. So you can really like someone and be like, oh, you're probably not, the best addition to the team at this stage for XYZ reasons. Sometimes, like, the more I've learned, I've gone along, is just usually your gut's telling you something for a reason and to sort of trust that. But also at the same time, still question it and ask yourself questions. Why am I feeling this way? It's making sure you're actually validating that initial gut feeling. But most of the time, it's going to lead you in the right direction.
So I think there's a couple of things there. I think as leaders and I think as people, as you get older, I think your ability to sense check your own emotions is really important, sort of pivotal step. I'm really frustrated by this thing. I think when you're younger, you just get caught up in the self-indulgence of being frustrated and this and whatever. But I think as you get older, you do start developing the ability, hang on, why am I feeling like this? Like, what is it? Okay, I can fix this thing, and then you sort that out. But I agree. I think sometimes, and I don't know if you've done it, don't need to tell me if you have, but sometimes you've made a hiring decision because you're balancing the need for speed and moving quickly. I sound like I was in a movie then. Balancing this need to move quickly with making the best hiring decisions you can. And sometimes you fall into the trap of you make a hire, but there's just still that little something, and you take a chance. And anytime I've taken a chance in the past, it's generally not ended well. So I think you start getting better at listening to that.
Yeah, definitely. I usually ask the question as well of when I'm hiring someone, like, could I see them in my role as well, or other people who are on a similar level, like, so that then they actually coming in and be able to grow with the company, grow with the team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you balance that thing that need to move quickly? You've got things to build. You're looking at your roadmap, your forecast of all the things you've committed to, and you need people to be able to do those things. How do you balance this desire to get hiring as quickly and efficiently as possible, but balancing out with we want to
So
minimize these hires?
this is also an age-old question in tech in terms of delivery, like balancing speed versus quality as well. Yeah. So I'm nice to see that this is a common question that many teams ask.
Yeah.
It's having a mishire. I'm not going to say a bad hire, but hiring someone is going to cost you a lot more time, and not just you, but the team as well. So if you do end up hiring someone and they don't work out, the impact on the roadmap on all of that is going to be a lot more significant as to if you took that extra week to do another interview and actually got that right person. It's all sort of a bit of a balance. Again, open and honest communication can work a lot of the time with chatting with product, as they'll usually understand the situations.
Yeah.
But that balancing of things is always difficult, particularly when there's a hard deadline that you have to meet with the work. But there's a reason you're looking to hire someone, is because you either need more people on the team or someone has left.
Yeah.
And so you can't really work around those things. You've just got to do what's best at the time. Each situation is probably going to be slightly different, but majority of the time it's probably going to be better just to take the couple of days, couple of weeks to just actually get that hire correct.
Yeah, the amount of time I've spent with product teams in the past, and you're looking at headcount growth or forecast for next quarter, and it's we need to have 2 engineers, we're going to need another designer, we're going to need another product manager into what's still a relatively small team. That's there. 5 net new hires, and we've seen that we traditionally we might have to do 1 headcount replacement a quarter. It's not unusual. So that's six hires over the space of a quarter. If you're interviewing, 3 or 4 candidates per role, do the math. Think of all the interviews then you've got to do, and you start having that conversation and start trying to block out time to do these, because you've got to have the time to be able to be in these conversations, not rushing from sprint planning session to an interview, and you're reading a resume walking down the corridor. You're trying to give yourself the best chance to do that. So sometimes just being able to communicate that stuff in that way opens people's eyes to, okay, we've got a big quarter of interviewing and all that sort of stuff happening. And again, I think coming back to this thing of getting all your teams involved as much as possible, so you can spread the workload that comes with hiring, because it's time consuming.
Definitely.
You do 4 interviews in a day, you're alive, don't you?
Oh yeah, need a lot of coffee sometimes.
Yeah.
It's important to just take that sort of step back and actually reconnect with why you're hiring in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's so you can go faster and build better in the future. And so it is a pretty important thing to be able to carve out 4 or 5 hours of interviews for the day and just get it right.
Yeah. You've mentioned a couple of times good communication. Is that, do you think, one of your biggest sort of lessons that you've sort of learned over the years with recruiting?
Yes. Don't assume anyone knows what you mean. You have to clearly say it. Assumptions can just cause people to go down very incorrect views, opinions, and even just go down rabbit holes of work. So very clear communications. Questions are good. Ask questions. But communication and just sharing, over communicating, is way better than, again, assuming that someone knows what you're talking about.
Yeah. When it comes to communication, less is definitely not more.
No.
That's it for pizza. Any other lessons? Any other big lessons?
Quite a few. I think sometimes I've been really pleasantly surprised by a lot of the hires that we've had. So, that person that you're in the interview with, like remembering that, they've got the stress, the anxiety, they may have been running 5 minutes late to the interview. So that all builds up. But then seeing like when you're like, yeah, this is the right person for the role, get them in. And for them to just change and blossom in the environment, like just those hiring decisions, and you see like them actually work out really well, and you think like, this is what it's about.
Yeah.
But lessons, there's probably quite a few. But again, you sort of remember them, tweak how you do it next time, and sort of move on. But
yeah. For people who are either in a similar position now, or they know they're going to be soon, they might be at a startup and they've landed, a Series A or something like that. It might be like a large seed round, and they know they're going to be having to build out a team. What advice would you give them?
Particularly for startups in that really early stage, getting the right people on the team, not necessarily the ones with the right skills. If you hire right with the personality, the mindsets, the approach to learning, skills will always come secondary. But getting those people who will challenge you about ideas and figure out, are we going in the right direction? We could also do this. People who are going to get on board with that vision and the dream that you've got for that company and really be on that whole journey with you. Hiring someone just because they're, a dev in X language, they'll be able to do that job that you've hired for them at that time. But, as startups, everything changes so quickly. In the 6 months, the next 6 months, they may not be ready for that next part of the journey, and then you'll need to find someone else to come in. So getting someone who can grow with the company is probably really key.
Yeah. And so does that come down to what we were talking about earlier around being very clear about what you're looking for to start with?
Yep. Thinking about probably in the next couple of months to a year, what sort of challenges you may face. But they don't have to be like specific things. So it might be that we're really looking at growth in the next year. So that means we'll need to be looking to grow the platform and be able to scale it and support more users as they come on board. Having someone that likes that approach and might have experience of done before, but they understand what it means to work at a company that's growing and been on that journey too. Lost my train of thought.
So with that in mind, then, is it important for people who you're going to hire to start? Do they have to have been in a startup environment before?
I don't necessarily think so. I think just having that self-motivation and that hunger to kind of learn a bit more and also persevere when things get a little tough, as they undoubtedly will. Being quite resilient is probably a pretty key thing. Knowing that someone's not going to crumble under the stress when you go, we've got no money. Someone who can really be a bit more steadfast in that approach. So they don't necessarily have to have been in that environment before, but someone who can understand that, because, they may have been in those environments outside of work. So not necessarily just within their roles. So I don't think it's a blocker. But if you ask the sort of right questions to determine where they sit on certain mindsets, approaches to general things, you can determine if they're probably going to be a good fit for the environment of that particular startup, because they're all pretty different.
And there's this thing, right, as well. I think some startups you see hiring a lot of people straight out of uni, probably because they're sort of fresh in this mindset of learning and of growth. It's quite a good segue. But also, if people have never experienced corporate life before that, and they join a startup, that's just their work experience. That's their experience of the working environment. This is what it's like when you go to work, go to a job. I think that the hardest thing is probably people who've never been in a startup and are probably sort of 10 years or so into a career, might have responsibilities and commitments outside of work, financially, and so going to a startup that might be risky, where there isn't a lot of where there isn't much process, not much documentation, not much clarity about what comes next, other than the next sprint and the next feature release. I think sometimes those people might find the startup environment, not for them. But I think there's this thing, right? This romanticism that gets attached to startups. It's all donuts and ping pong tables. Like, those things are great, but it's hard graft, and it's insecurity about what comes next, and a lot of hope, and a lot of, I hope this works, and who knows, and if it doesn't, then we'll do something else.
Yeah, a lot of things where you've put in months to build something, and then it's just not the right thing to build. A lot of change, especially if you're in an industry or sector that just doesn't have a lot of startup competition. So you're with these rather large sort of incumbent companies, and then you're trying to push these changes in a sector that's never really had change. You end up having to figure out the best approach all the time. So having someone who can kind of work with that too.
Yeah. If you're in a sector where it's slow to get traction to start with, and everyone's you build a new thing and you push the feature out live, and a week later no one's really using it, and you're like, we just spent 3 months building that thing. So you don't always get the feedback you're looking for straight away in terms of user adoption. So super challenging. Is it still better than having a normal job though?
Yes. There's a lot more to that answer, but like having that real ownership over what you're building, the future of the company, the product, and actually seeing like changes in the industry and going, oh, like our company has contributed to that.
Yeah.
Like that feeling is amazing.
Yeah.
But that once you get rid of that safety net is where you can really actually take off and shoot for the stars.
Nice. So big takeaways then for people who've been listening are really plan out well and be really clear in amongst your hiring team of what you're looking for, the traits, the skills, the attitudes that you're looking for. I mean, everybody should be sort of contributing, I think, to that discussion. Get your team involved in the hiring and the interviewing. Like, get this collaborative thinking around decision making. Trust your gut a little bit as well. So evaluate the data, but also trust your gut. Do I like this person? You're going to be spending a lot of time with them. Yes, they've got some technical skills, but do I actually like this person? Would I just hang out with them? I totally get that. I think go back to that first point, the amount of times in the past I've had hiring managers say things like, I'll know it when I see it. 17 interviews later, they still haven't found it because no one's right, because we haven't been able to define exactly what it is that you're looking for. So don't do the I'll know it when I see it. Anything else that are missing, or are they the sort of big ticket items?
No, they're definitely the big ones. I guess just a few more ones to add there too that just popped into my head. Just definitely make sure that you're not surrounding yourself with people like you as well. So making sure like diverse opinions and views, because obviously that's just going to contribute to a better team and be better for everyone. And, this is kind of one of those old sayings, just try and find someone that's going to replace you as well. So someone that's willing to, eventually when they're ready, take that step up and move into your role. So always hiring to replace yourself.
Nice. And that's such a really interesting little segue too. I've got this other thing that be in my bonnet about businesses should always be recruiting, not necessarily always hiring, because they're two different things, but always having conversations with potential people, because you don't know what's going to happen with your own team, whether somebody leaves, like it's going to happen at some stage, or the next round of funding lands and you need to move quickly. So doing things like hosting meetups, and Xplor are great at that, and hosting meetups for technical groups to come and have discussions with. They actually come to your workplace. They get to meet some of your team. To me, that's really smart. It's always recruiting, different to always hiring, because there's headcount restrictions and that sort of thing. But if you're always in this recruiting mindset, always happy to talk to people, entertaining conversations, then it's as a hiring team, like it's doing wonders for your little brand.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Building up that company brand, team brand, but also like giving back to that community. Like, hosting those meetups, sharing the information you've learned. Like, it's all positives.
Yeah. I'm mindful of time, 40 minutes in. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. International Women's Day, so I should let you go. And you're off travelling for the rest of the day, going off on an adventure. So I should probably let you go.
Pack and jump on a plane.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time to do it. I really, really appreciate it. Lauren Grimes, an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Anytime, Simon. Thanks for chatting.